I set my wine glass down and smiled at nothing in particular, the way you do when you're trying to look like you belong somewhere you clearly don't. My brother's girlfriend had been talking for 20 minutes straight, not to me, about me, right in front of me. Her name was Kendall. She'd been dating my brother for about 4 months, and in those 4 months she had somehow decided that I was the family's cautionary tale. The example of what happens when you don't dream big enough. It was a Sunday dinner at my parents' house in Oakville, the kind my mom still insists on every few weeks, with the good tablecloth and the good dishes and the rosemary chicken she's been making since I was 11. It should have felt like home. It usually does. But Kendall had arrived with a bottle of Niagara Chardonnay and a very confident opinion about everyone's life choices. She was in marketing. She'd said this 4 times since we sat down. She worked for a firm downtown and had recently been promoted to brand strategist, which I understood to be a real job and not a dig, but the way she kept rotating it into conversation made it feel like a credential being flashed. Like she wanted us to know what league she was in. My brother, I'll be honest, he looked proud. The kind of proud that's a little uncomfortable to watch. He kept nodding at things she said before she finished saying them. I work in environmental compliance. I review applications, assess impact reports, make sure companies aren't dumping things they shouldn't be dumping into watersheds. It's not glamorous. It doesn't come with a title that sounds exciting at a dinner table. When people ask what I do, I usually say I work for the province and let them fill in the blanks, because explaining the full thing takes longer than most people want to invest on a Sunday evening. So when Kendall asked what I did, I gave her the jilted version. She tilted her head. Oh, so like, government work? Environmental regulation? Yeah. Interesting. She said it the way people say interesting when they mean the opposite. Then she turned to my brother and said, I could never do something so structured. I need to be somewhere I can actually make an impact. I picked up my fork. I put it back down. My dad didn't look up from his plate. My mom made a small noise and reached for the serving spoon. My brother laughed softly, like it was a light observation, like Kendall had just commented on the weather. I didn't say anything. This is the thing about me that people have always misread. I don't react fast. I never have. When something stings, I go quiet, not because I'm devastated, not because I don't have anything to say, but because I've learned that the moment you feel most like snapping is usually not the right moment to open your mouth. My grandmother used to call it the long patience. She'd tap the side of her head and say, the slow river cuts the deepest canyon, Mara. Mara is me. My name is Mara, I'm 31. I have a master's degree in environmental science from the University of Guelph. I own a condo in Hamilton that I'm renovating 1 room at a time. I run half marathons, badly but consistently. And I have spent the last 6 years working inside a system that most people don't know exists until it's the only thing standing between them and a contaminated drinking water supply. But that Sunday, at my parents' dining room table, with the rosemary chicken going cold on my plate, none of that felt like armor. Kendall kept going. She had a lot to say, it turned out. About ambition, about people who play it safe, about how her generation, even though we were clearly the same age, understood that you had to build something, not just maintain something. She talked about a campaign she'd managed that went viral on TikTok. She talked about her 5-year plan, which included opening her own consultancy. She talked about a feature article that a local lifestyle magazine was supposedly writing about her firm. And every time she made a point, she'd glance at me. Not at my mom, not at my dad, at me. Like I was the example she was contrasting herself against. My brother refilled her glass. My dad finally looked up, but only to ask about the chicken. I kept eating. I smiled when it seemed appropriate. I asked Kendall a few genuine questions about her work, because I was raised to be polite, and because part of me was still trying to decide if I was misreading her. I wasn't. The moment I knew I wasn't misreading her was when she turned to my mom and said, "You must be so proud of Liam. He's really going places." And then, after a perfect little pause, "It's good that he found his path. Not everyone does." My mom looked at me. I looked at my mom. Neither of us said anything. My brother, who is 28 and works in real estate and is objectively doing well for himself, didn't correct her. He didn't say Mara's doing great too. He didn't say let's not do this. He just smiled and said, "Thanks, babe." That was the moment I felt it. Not anger exactly, something quieter, a settling. The way a lake goes still right before a storm. I'd been in this dynamic before. The quiet sibling, the one who doesn't talk about herself at parties, the one who shows up, helps with the dishes, leaves without making a scene. And for a long time, I thought that was a virtue. I thought the opposite of loud wasn't weak, it was just measured. But sitting there watching my brother beam while his girlfriend used me as a counterexample at my own parents' table, I started to wonder if my quietness had been misread as permission. Like, Mara won't mind. Mara never says anything. Mara will just let it go. Dessert came. My mom made butter tarts, which are genuinely the best butter tarts I've ever had in my life and which I almost couldn't taste that night because Kendall was still talking. She'd moved on to a new subject, a startup that some friend of hers had just sold for a significant amount of money. She knew the number, she told us the number, she said, "That's what happens when you take risks. That's what happens when you don't just settle." That word. She didn't look at me when she said it that time. She didn't have to. I took a slow breath. I finished my butter tart. I folded my napkin. And then I said quietly, to no one in particular, "Actually, can I ask you something, Kendall?" She looked a little surprised. Up until that point, I'd been mostly nodding. I think she'd categorized me as a passive audience. "Of course," she said, with a small smile. "You mentioned your firm earlier. Is it the one that handled the Lakeview Commons project? The mixed-use development near Burlington?" She blinked. "Yeah, actually. We did the brand rollout for that. It was a big campaign." I nodded slowly. "Okay, I thought that might be the one." There was a beat. She was waiting for me to say something complimentary. I could see it on her face, the small lean forward, the anticipation. "I asked because I was part of the review team on that project," I said. "The environmental assessment. We flagged some issues about 2 years ago. Stormwater runoff, potential impact on the 12-mile creek corridor. The developer had to go back and redesign the drainage system before approval came through." I picked up my wine glass. "The brand was very nice, though," I said. "I remember the logo." The table was quiet. My brother looked at Kendall. Kendall looked at me. My dad put down his fork. My mom, bless her, was pressing her lips together in a way that meant she was trying very hard not to smile. "I didn't know you worked on that," my brother said. His voice had shifted slightly. Less dinner party smooth. More uncertain. "There's a lot you don't ask about," I said. Not unkindly, just honestly. Kendall recovered fast. "She's good at that, I'll give her that." She said something about how it was interesting that our work had overlapped, how she hadn't realized the approval process was so involved. She made it sound like a casual observation, like she was simply learning something new. But the performance had changed. The careful glances in my direction stopped. The commentary about ambition and playing it safe dried up. She was still charming. She's genuinely charming, but the angle had shifted, like someone had quietly turned off a spotlight. After dinner, while my mom and I were doing dishes, she touched my arm. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know," I told her, "but I wanted to." My mom handed me a plate to dry. She's not a big talker either. We stood there for a while in the kitchen, just the sounds of the water and the clinking dishes and the muffled conversation from the living room. "Your grandmother would have said the same thing," she said finally. "The canyon?" I asked. She smiled. "Exactly." On the drive home, I didn't feel triumphant. That's the thing that surprises people when I tell this story. They expect me to say it felt amazing that I finally got mine, that justice was served hot at the dinner table. But it didn't really feel like that. It felt like relief. Just relief. The specific relief of finally being honest, even when honest comes out quiet. I've spent a lot of my adult life being the person in the room who says less. Not because I have less to say, but because I grew up being told, in various subtle ways, that the way I moved through the world, carefully, without a lot of noise, wasn't exciting enough to command the room. So I stopped trying. I just did my work and let it exist in the background. And for a while, that was fine. More than fine, even. I like what I do. I genuinely believe it matters. Somewhere in this province, there is a creek that still runs clean, partly because someone on a review team, me, or someone like me, said, "Wait, look at this more carefully. You don't get a TikTok campaign about that. You don't get a lifestyle magazine feature. But it's real." The thing is, I don't think Kendall is a bad person. I've thought about this a lot in the weeks since that dinner. I think she's someone who learned early that confidence was currency, that taking up space was how you made your mark. And in a lot of rooms, that's true. It works. She's probably very good at her job, but she made an error in reading the room that night. She read my silence as emptiness. She assumed that, because I wasn't performing, I didn't have anything to perform. And I think my brother made a similar error, a quieter one, maybe even an unconscious one, but still real. Because when someone you love lets another person use you as a punchline, the silence says something. It doesn't say nothing's wrong. It says, "I'm choosing the comfort of the moment over you." And that sits with you in a way that doesn't clean up easily, even after the dishes are done. We talked, my brother and I, not that night, but a few days later. He called me on a Wednesday. I was on my lunch break, eating a sandwich in my car in a parking lot near the office, which is not a glamorous setting for a meaningful conversation, but there it is. He apologized. Genuinely, I think. His voice had that specific uncomfortable quality that real apologies have, the one that sounds slightly worse than it might have been scripted because it's actually unrehearsed. I should have said something, he said. Yeah, I said. You should have. I didn't realize. Liam. I stopped him gently. You didn't have to realize, you just had to pay attention. He was quiet for a moment. Then, are we okay? I thought about it. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because I wanted to actually think about it rather than just say what would make the call end comfortably. We will be, I said. But I need you to not do that again. I need you to be my brother first, even when it's awkward. He said he understood. I think he meant it. We'll see. Kendall texted me about a week later, which I didn't expect. It was brief. She said she'd been thinking about the dinner, that she knew she could sometimes come across as a lot, and that she hoped she hadn't made me feel unwelcome. It wasn't a full apology, but it was something. I replied with something equally brief and true. I appreciate you saying that. I don't know where things go from here. I'm not the kind of person who wraps things in absol and declares them resolved. Life doesn't work that way. My brother is still dating Kendall. We'll probably end up at the same dinner table again before too long, and it might be fine, it might be awkward, it might be something in between. But I know something now that I didn't fully know before that Sunday. Quiet is not the same as invisible, and the next time someone in that room mistakes my stillness for absence, I'll let them believe it, right up until the moment I don't. The creek still runs clean, that's enough for me.